Hi there, my name is David and I will be your Linode developer advocate for this video. In fact, this is the third video in a series that I've partnered up with Linode to make. So the purpose of this video series is to introduce people to the idea of self-hosting without necessarily needing to buy a bunch of hardware to get started. So as I mentioned, this is the third video in this series. So be sure to check out the first couple of videos to make sure you're up to date and are kind of familiar with everything we're going to talk about in this video. The topic we're going to cover today is actually an application that I run in Docker called Bookstack. And I've actually been running this for a while now. I have it publicly facing on my own home server to give people access to resources from the videos on my YouTube channel. Before we jump in and talk about what Bookstack is and how to get it set up, definitely check the video description for a link to find out how you can get $100 in free credit to check out Linode for 60 days. So here is the Bookstack app website. Like it says here, it is a simple and free wiki software that you can kind of customize to your liking and do all kinds of stuff with categorization and tags and pages and books and shelves and all kinds of stuff so that you can organize your data, your thoughts, whatever you want to put on paper and make it so that it's easily accessible for you and or the people that you're sharing this resource with. And basically, like it says here, it's free, it's open source, it's got an easy and simple user interface, which I totally agree with. It's searchable and connected, configurable. I agree with that as well. So basically, there's lots of information here. Definitely check out bookstackapp.com for more information about kind of what the perks and benefits are to Bookstack. And just to kind of give you a real world scenario here, if we actually jump over to this other tab I've got open, if you go to this dbtech.com website, this is what I'm hosting for, again, for the resources for my YouTube channel that I give people access to just by going to this domain name. You know, there's all kinds of different stuff in here. You can see I've got things categorized, you know, by Casa OS and code snippets, and Chasm was a quick little video series I did, as well as Docker containers. And this is kind of what I want to dig into just a little bit, because this is where I have the most amount of just different stuff going on. So let's open up Docker containers. And here we can see that I've got several posts in here. And if we scroll all the way down, you know, we can get down to the footer here. And so let's just take a quick look at Pinry. This was a video I released on my channel very recently. And if I open this up, here we can see that I've got different pages inside this book. So I should back up. So these are my shelves. These are the kind of the root categories, and Docker containers is a shelf in my Bookstack app. So when I come into here, each one of these entries here is what we would call a book. So if I open the Pinry book on the Docker container bookshelf, then we can see here is the book, and here are different pages within this book. So that's kind of how it breaks down on different levels to kind of categorize things that way. So if we open this up, we can see that if I click on installation here, I've got a code block that you could just come up here and copy and paste into your Docker Compose or your Portainer instance to deploy this for yourself. If I come back, I can open this up, and here we can see that I've got inline code, I've got headers, I've got images. I've got all kinds of stuff going on here, and it's very, very easy to copy and paste images. You can just go somewhere, right click on an image, click copy, and then come back here and click paste, and it will put that image in here for you. It's very, very intuitive. It's very, very easy to use, and it's doing things like inserting code blocks and code snippets and images and links, and all of this different kind of stuff is very, very easy to use when you're using Bookstack. So if we want to, we can come over here and click on Edit. And here we can see that we've got kind of what would be called a WYSIWYG editor, or a what you see is what you get editor here. And, you know, we've got all kinds of stuff going on here. You know, I can update this all in real time very, very easily. If I want to, I can come over here to the right side and I can add page tags, again, for additional categorization. If I wanted to have a group of containers all connected by tags, I could absolutely do that, and which is this little tab right here. Attachments, I can add attachments to this and link to those attachments inside my content over here as well. And then I can actually set something up that makes it a page template. So I can just kind of do a rough outline and then come back and fill in the blanks later on if that's how I wanted to handle things. And this is just very, very entry level stuff with regards to Bookstack. So it's very intuitive. It's very easy to use. And that's why I wanted to show it to you today. So here we are back on the home page here. And over here, we've got actions where I can add a new shelf, a new list. I can toggle details. Where I can get more information over here on the left side. And then I can toggle light mode if I wanted to do that, but I don't, so I'm not going to. Up here at the top, we've got settings that we can click on. We can allow this to be publicly accessible. We can add high security image uploads. We can disable comments, or on the flip side, we can enable comments by disabling that check mark. Our customization tab, we can add an application name. The page editor, again, that WYSIWYG option, or you can do Markdown. I'm not a big fan of Markdown. It's too much for my brain. So I like to use the WYSIWYG option whenever possible. So below that, we can upload an application logo, which we can see this matches this right up here. We can set our primary application colors, content colors, home pages, footer links. We can add we can add different code to the header, whether it's style sheets or styles. If you're doing CSS that way, you can also add analytics and all kinds of different stuff in this custom HTML head content area. If we look at footer links here, we can see that this area matches up with these two little links down there. Registration, you can enable or disable registration. Now, the thing to keep in mind with this is you will need to have a mail system enabled or available, whether you're doing a send mail option or an SMTP option to send your mail. Now, the caveat to that, of course, is send mail is finicky at best. And if you want to use an SMTP server like Google or any of the others that are out there, you will need to open a ticket on your account to enable the ports necessary, whether it's 25, 587 or 465, you'll need to open a support ticket to get that enabled on your account. So that's just something to keep in mind there. You can enable domain restrictions, again, for this user registration, so that you can just say only people that have a at mydomain.com kind of thing set up for domain registration or for email registration on the site here. And then, of course, email confirmation. If you're going to set up users, you should always have email confirmation. But again, you will need to figure out a solution for that, whether it's send mail and hope for the best, or open a ticket to get the proper ports opened on your Linode to get access to an SMTP server. Over here on the left under categories, we can see that we are on Bookstack version 2203.1. And of course, that will give you an idea of, are you on the most recent version? You can click that, open that in a new tab if you want, and find out what the most current version is. And we are on that current version. If we come over here to maintenance, we've got a recycle bin. You can clean up images. You can send a test email. Again, that's part of the configuration that we'll touch on here in just a little bit. We've got an audit log. Basically, hey, here's everything that's happened on the site, when it happened, who did it, all kinds of stuff available in your audit log. You can of course filter that by different criteria. For users, again, we've got, for my needs, I don't want anybody else contributing to this, so I've just got my user. For the sake of permissions, though, a guest user is required, so that's why that's there. We've got different roles that we can set up and assign permissions to each of those roles if we wanted to do that. And then there's webhooks. I will leave, I'll hopefully, whoever uploads this video over at Linode will put all of the resources that we need to get more information about webhooks in the description down below. So that is kind of the gist of Bookstack and how to use it, kind of the back end stuff. Of course, there's a section in here about user accounts, but that's kind of generic across the board. You can upload your image or change your password or whatever. So we're not really going to get into that. But with all of that kind of out of the way, let's take a look at how to get this set up in Portainer. You could use the same method for Docker Compose if you wanted to do it via the command line, but for the sake of simplicity and an introduction to self-hosting, we're going to use a graphical user interface called Portainer. So here we are logged into Portainer. Again, if you're not familiar with Portainer and how to get it set up, make sure to check out the first couple of videos in this video series so that you can get caught up on all of the kind of the background information about what we're about to do here. And so what we want to do in this case is actually come over here to stacks. And then we're going to add a stack. And then off on my other screen here, I've got the Docker Compose that we're going to use for this. And we're going to go through this line by line to explain what each line it does and why we're doing that thing. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that in there. So I've gone ahead and pasted this in. The next thing I want to do here is give the stack a name. That way we can see it in our list of available stacks in our stack list in Portainer. Just a little clerical thing we've got to do there. So now that we've got all of this copied and pasted in here, let's kind of run through what we need to do here. So up at the top, we've got a version 2 stack or Docker Compose. Each different version of Docker Compose has different features available to it. We're not doing anything super crazy in this stack or this Docker Compose, so version 2 will be just fine for this. Below that, we've got another line that's called services. And then under that, we're going to have all of the different services for our setup here. So our first service will be Bookstack. And under that, the image that we're going to use, basically the container image, what we're going to pull from is the Linux server version of Bookstack. Linux server is a great development team. I've actually been using them for a couple of years now whenever they've got a container out that I really like to use. They're great about doing security updates and keeping things updated very, very regularly. So I really trust that these guys are doing what we want them to do. Below that, we've got a container name. Basically, the container is going to be named Bookstack. I just like to give things very common, very deliberate names for when I'm setting these things up. Below that, we've got networks. Now, the networks line here is basically going to put all of the containers that we're installing in our semi-self-hosted setup here on a similar on the same Docker network to give us easier access so that they can communicate better and more easily. So we're just saying, hey, use the NGINX proxy manager _ default network for my Docker traffic here. So below that, we've got our environmental variables. The PUID and PGID, these are just default. These should work just fine on Linode. Basically, we're giving them user identification and group identification permissions, and we're setting that by identifying the user and group. 1000 should be fine for this setup. Below that, we've got an app URL. Basically, this kind of works in the background when it deploys so that the different resources can be pulled appropriately. Now, when you put this environmental variable in, you will need to think about what you want your URL to be. Of course, you'll need to own the domain and have the subdomain set up for this to work. For the sake of getting this set up, I'm going to use https notes.dbtech.tips, and we will set up that domain here in just a moment. But that is what we're going to use for the application URL. Below that, we've got a database host. That actually is declared later on. Basically, this is just saying, hey, use this host name to connect to the database. We're actually declaring that down here in our second service name. Our database user will be Bookstack. Of course, you can change that. However, if you do change it here, you will want to change it in the Bookstack DB service as well. But we'll talk about that here in just a moment. The database password, again, change that. But when you change it here, change it in that database container as well. The database is Bookstack app. Again, same thing. If you change it here, change it there, because we want to make sure that everything lines up so that so that the application can authenticate in the database and make a full connection to do what it needs to do. The app default dark mode equals true. This is completely optional. I prefer dark mode anywhere I can get it. So in this case, I've set it to true. By default, it is false. So if you wanted it to just be light mode and people could have the option to turn dark mode on, you could just omit this line entirely or change the true to false. For volumes, basically where on your server is this application going to reside? Following the schema that we've used in previous videos, we're going to store this in home, Docker, Bookstack, and then because we've got an application and a database container, I've got both of those in the same Bookstack location, but I've segregated them into config and DB folders just to keep things a little bit separated. This :/config is the internal setting for Bookstack. Don't change that, leave that alone. Below that, we've got ports of 6875 here. This is basically where it's going to be available on your IP address. So if you were to go to your IP address : this port, the 6875, then this would come up and that's how you would access it. However, because we're going to be using a reverse proxy on a different network, this is just a technicality. We're going to put this on port 80. So this is kind of irrelevant, but you need it anyway. Restart policy is unless stopped. So basically if there's a hiccup, power outage, whatever, it'll just automatically restart when it needs to do that, unless you manually stop it, and then it won't restart until you manually restart it. Below that, we've got it depending on the Bookstack database. When you've got an application that needs a database to run, you always want to make sure that the database is up and running before the application does anything. So what it's going to do is once we deploy this, it's just going to kind of hang out and keep pinging the database. And once the database container is up and running, then it will start going through its setup process for the Bookstack container app. Or app container, rather. Below that, again, we've got our Bookstack app that we've referenced multiple times we've got the Bookstack database that we've referenced multiple times in the Bookstack app. Again, we're going to use Linux servers, Maria database. We're going to give the container for the Bookstack database the appropriate name here. Again, we're going to attach this to the NGINX proxy manager _default network, just like we did with the Bookstack app. We've got some environmental variables, just like we did before. Again, we've got a PUID and PGID of both of 1000, perfectly fine there for this. We've got a root password. Now, this is just a security thing, so that somebody can't try to access your database with a root user and no password. We're not going to use it for anything other than that. Below that, we've got a time zone of America/Denver. You'll want to change that to your locale, your time zone, so that it's appropriate for you. Again, our MySQL database is Bookstack app. Our user is Bookstack, and our MySQL password we've set up here as well. Again, if you change any of these here or up here, make sure that they match. That's super important, or they won't communicate. And then below that, again, we've got our volumes of home, Docker, Bookstack. And again, I put this in the DB subfolder, just like I put this in the config subfolder up here. And then again, restart unless stopped. And up here, we declared our networks of NGINX Proxy Manager default, and down here, we need to declare that as well. Also, this external true just means that it's already a network that's available on our system. So just that's kind of the setting for that. So once we've got all of this and we're happy with all of this, the next thing we want to do is actually click on, we'll scroll down just a little bit and click on deploy the stack. Now this will take a couple of minutes to deploy and do what it needs to do. But because I've already had this up and running for testing purposes, it actually went pretty quickly for me. But give it a few minutes before you start to wonder what's going on. So what we can do is open up the Bookstack application there. And here we can see that we've got some IP addresses for our different containers. And for Bookstack, it's 172.18.0.6. And we've got our published ports over here. And then for our database, we're on, again, 172.18.0.5. So if we open up the logs for Bookstack here, here we can see that it migrated our database settings and we're good to go. It's up and running. So the next step will actually be to get our domain configured in Linode, as well as getting our domain configured in NGINX Proxy Manager. So the next thing we actually want to do here is come over to our Linode dashboard and come over here to domains. We want to find the domain that we're going to use for this, or that we've been using for this. We're going to go ahead and click there. And then because all of these are going to be pointing to the same Linode instance, what we can do is actually come down to our CNAME records, click on add a CNAME, and then put our host name in here, which would be whatever our subdomain is going to be. In this case, it was notes. So we would just type that in like so. And then we could just do at like so. And basically, that's all we need to do for the setup process in our Linode for the subdomain setup. Just click save, should be good to go. I've already done this. We can actually, let's close that. We can actually see that our CNAME record for notes is right there, and it aliases to dbtech.tips. So just a quick setup as far as that's concerned. The next thing we want to do now is come over to NGINX Proxy Manager and click on our hosts and then proxy hosts. And then right here, we can see our proxy hosts. So what we want to do is click on add a proxy host. We're going to put our domain, we're going to put our domain name in there. So it'll be notes.dbtech.tips and press enter or tab, either of those. It's required. If you just type that in there and click next or click out of it, it goes away. It's weird. So click enter or tab to make that stick in there. Our scheme in this case will be HTTP, and then our forward hostname /IP. In this particular case, what we're going to do is come back over to here and find the IP address listed next to our containers. We're going to copy that. We're going to come back over here. We're going to paste that in, make sure there's no additional spaces or anything like that. And then again, because we're using this IP address in here, we can put this on port 80 because that's the internal port that we can see right there. So we'll come back over here. We're going to set that to port 80. We're going to cache our assets we're going to set up block common exploits. We'll enable WebSocket support. Then we're going to come over to here, and I've actually pulled this already. So what I would do is actually click request a new SSL certificate. We're going to force SSL. We're going to enable HTTP2 support, HSTS enabled and HSTS subdomains. That's all fine. And we don't need to use a DNS challenge because we're hosting all of our DNS here locally at Linode. So what we can do next is click on I agree and click save. This may take a minute or two to complete, and then once it is, we'll come back and take a look. Okay, so now we're up and going. We can see that our proxy hosts now has notes.dbtech.tips listed in here. What I like to do in this case, because I've had some finicky behavior in the past, I'm going to come over to here. I'm going to click edit, and I'm going to come over to SSL, and here's exactly why. Because I checked all those boxes, but they didn't stick. So we're just going to go ahead and re-enable all of this, like so, and click save. And now, if I click notes, here we are. Now we're at our notes.dbtech.tips login screen. So now that we're here, the next thing we want to do is come up and log in. So what we're going to do is type in admin at admin.com, and the password is password. There we go. So now we are logged in. Of course, we can update our profile here. We can update our settings. We can start creating content. We can share this with other people if we want to give them access to it as well. But that's how easy it is to get Bookstack set up in Docker using Linode. So definitely, again, check out the video description down below to find out how you can get $100 in free credit on Linode for 60 days. And hopefully, while you're down there, you'll hit the subscribe button to support the Linode YouTube channel. If you enjoy this content, definitely do that. I've got plenty more content in this series coming out very, very soon. So with all of that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. So thanks for your time, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video.